Truman's administration continued its internal loyalty program in the early 1950s, which had been established by Executive Order 9835 to screen federal employees for subversive ties. The negative consequences of this program, which continued until his term ended, included the principle of guilt by association, meaning that merely being sympathetically associated with a group deemed totalitarian, fascist, communist, or subversive by the Attorney General could be grounds for questioning an employee's loyalty and lead to job loss. This policy was criticized for infringing on freedom of speech and association and for laying the groundwork for the wider anti-communist crusade. Procedures to challenge these charges were often meaningless in practice. A major negative law passed by a Democrat-controlled Congress over Truman's veto in 1950 was the Internal Security Act, also known as the McCarran Act. Truman called this law a long step toward totalitarianism and denounced its provisions that he felt put the government in the thought control business. The act's negative elements included requiring Communist and Communist Front organizations to register with the Attorney General, imposing severe restrictions on members of these groups, such as denying them passports or government jobs, and authorizing the emergency detention of individuals suspected of espionage or sabotage. Although Truman vetoed it, Congress overrode the veto, and it became law. The onset of the Korean War in June 1950, which Truman committed U.S. forces to as a police action under the United Nations, also led to negative domestic actions. To manage the wartime economy, Truman declared a state of emergency in December 1950, granting him wide executive powers. His administration then implemented significant federal regulation over the national economy and private business, utilizing agencies like the Economic Stabilization Agency and the Office of Defense Mobilization. These actions included imposing wage and price controls, raising corporate and income taxes, slashing non-military and social program spending by nearly 30%, and channeling materials into war industries while prohibiting the expansion of domestic goods factories. These measures, while aimed at mobilization, tightly connected the U.S. economy to military spending for decades, increased federal bureaucracy, and caused initial inflation spikes and public hoarding of goods. Furthermore, the military conduct of the war itself included the highly criticized 1951 decision by Truman to relieve General Douglas MacArthur from command for challenging the administration's policy of limited war and avoiding escalation with China, a move that provoked intense domestic backlash and contributed to a significant decline in Truman's public support. The Democratic Party's southern wing, the Dixiecrats, remained a dominant force in Congress, consistently and successfully using their influence, particularly through the filibuster, to block significant civil rights legislation throughout the early 1950s. This prolonged the institutionalized system of racial segregation and discrimination known as Jim Crow, contributing to the continued negative reality for African Americans. For example, they often weakened and minimized the impact of even initial legislative breakthroughs, like the Civil Rights Acts of 1957 and 1960. Finally, the remaining years of Truman's term were marred by investigations into corruption within various parts of his administration, which, while not directly implicating the president himself, created a climate of scandal that severely damaged the Democratic Party's reputation and became a major issue in the 1952 election.